What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 1 fantasy football defense rankings. I've already gone through the running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. This is going to be my final video before we actually dive into Week 1. So let's just get right into it here. Starting off in Tier 1, I do think there's like a clear number one option, and that is the Denver Broncos. They were the number one fantasy defense in points per game last year. They draw a great matchup here in Week 1 against the Titans. The Titans have the lowest implied point total this week. You have a rookie quarterback, Cam Ward making his debut. Everything lines up here for the Broncos to be a super strong play here in Week 1, so they're going to be the only Tier 1 option. I'm going to have two teams in Tier 2. The first one is going to be the Steelers going up against the Jets. The Jets have the second lowest implied point total. You have a new offensive situation here, new coaching staff, Justin Fields coming in to play quarterback. Outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, the weapons are just pretty atrocious across the board. And then now they've also suffered injuries to their offensive line with Elijah Vera Tucker, set to miss a lot of time here. So Steelers, capable defense. Jets likely going to be a very weak offense. Good spot here to fire up the Steelers. Then another team with a really strong matchup. We have the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Saints. The Saints are tied with the Jets for the second lowest implied point total. You have Spencer Rattler at quarterback. The Saints at this point are just kind of a disaster. This is not a scary offense. I do think the Cardinals defense will be pretty solid this season, and they draw a really nice matchup here in Week 1. Now, looking at Tier 3, going to start off this tier with the Commanders going up against the Giants. The Giants are tied for the fourth lowest implied point total. You have a new quarterback here with Russell Wilson. We'll see, how well he plays right out of the gates here. And then just in 2024, this was not a good offense. They averaged the second fewest points per game. Like I talked about, new quarterback, integrating into the offense. It's just not a super scary offensive unit. I think the Commanders are a nice play this week. Then I'm going to have the Jets taking on the Steelers, and I do think we could see a bounce back from this defense here in 2025. In 2023, they averaged the fourth most fantasy points per game. They really slipped last year in 2024. They were pretty much unplayable. They were 21st in fantasy points per game. I'm not super sold on the Steelers offense, and I think they're probably going to be worse early on in the season than they are, later on. You have a new quarterback with Aaron Rodgers coming in. You have a new wide receiver, one with DK Metcalf. This offense might, end up being decent, around league average, but I assume they're going to, develop their chemistry, improve throughout the season. Week 1 in a pretty tough matchup. I do think the Jets are a solid option this week. Then we're going to have the Eagles going up against the Cowboys. I'd say this is like the first defensive matchup where the offense they're going up against isn't just like kind of a disaster. Like the Cowboys offense, I think they're going to be solid this year. I'm in on Dak Prescott. Obviously, I'm in on CeeDee Lamb. I'm much higher on George Pickens than consensus, but Vegas has not given them a lot of respect this week. They are tied for the fifth lowest implied point total. This Eagles defense is obviously top tier. They were seventh in points per game last year. I think they're going to get off to a solid start here in 2025. And then the last team in Tier 4 is going to be the 49ers going up against the Seahawks. One of the themes you're going to see in my top 12 here is just kind of targeting some of these defenses going up against some offenses that have undergone a lot of change in the offseason, where maybe it's going to take them a little bit to kind of settle in. That's definitely, the situation here with the Seahawks, where pretty much everything is different on the offensive side. You have a new offensive coordinator. You have a new quarterback with Sam Darnold coming in. Your weapons are different, right? DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett are gone. So just changes across the board here. Their implied point totals at 20.5. That's not super scary. You have a healthy 49ers defense coming into the season. They are going to close out Tier 3. And then my fourth and final tier, we're going to start off with the Rams going up against the Texans. I think we're starting to get into the territory where these aren't like smash matchups, but they're certainly fine to start in the defensive spot. The Texans have the ninth lowest implied point total. We know this offensive line is really rough. They allowed the third most sacks last season, and the line arguably got worse heading into 2025. I think this is a wide receiver room that's going to improve throughout the season. You have two rookies as your top four wide receivers with Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. So I don't know how involved those guys are going to be early on. I do think Week 1, Rams, certainly a playable option. Then we kind of have a sketchy play here. We have the Bengals going up against the Browns, and now we're kind of veering into like the bad defense going up against a bad offense territory, because I have very little confidence just in this Bengals defense, in a vacuum. But you look at the matchup here against the Browns, this is not a good offense, led by Joe Flacco, questionable pass catching weapons. The running back room is kind of a disaster. And so I think you can count on the Bengals enough in this matchup to not just give up a ton of points to a sorry offense, but it could also kind of bite you in the butt if Flacco goes out, has one of his big games, and then you're just, feeling frustrated that you did fire up the Bengals. At the number 10 spot, I'm going to go with the Vikings. And I had a really tough time ranking the Vikings this week because last season they were a great fantasy defense. They were second in points per game. They were great at forcing turnovers. They led the NFL in interceptions, and it wasn't close. I think they had 5 more than the second best team. I just don't quite know what to make of this Bears offense heading into week 1. I could certainly see the path where they're just kind of clicking, they're firing on all cylinders, and they look like a really solid unit under Ben Johnson. But I could also see the Vikings kind of giving Caleb Williams some fits. Maybe it takes a little bit for them to kind of settle in. So I have the Vikings here at number 10. I could see an argument for them being higher. Like I said, I kind of went back and forth on them heading into week 1. Then I'm going to go with the Patriots going up against the Raiders. The Raiders are tied for the 6th lowest implied point total. This is another unit where you have a new coaching staff coming in. You have a new quarterback in Geno Smith. I do think the Patriots defense is going to be a lot better than they were last year. And then the final team, the Chiefs, going up against the Chargers. I don't think the Chiefs are an amazing play, but they are a plus defense going up against an offense that I do think is going to be above average, but I'm not super scared of this Chargers offense coming in and just putting up 35 plus points against the Chiefs. I think they're fine. I think they're solid, but I think the Chiefs will be able to, reasonably control them in this game. So that is going to wrap it up for my top 12 defenses here in week 1. Any fantasy questions, feel free to drop them down below. Thank you all for stopping by. Good luck this week, and I will see you in the next one.